Hello, hello, and welcome to Community TV with Adaire. This is TV for you by TV from me, where I talk to people in the community who are doing amazing things to add value to the lives of people around them. This could be anything from meditation, a yoga class, learning to cook, reading tarot cards, healing, physical fitness, or even gardening. The idea of this is for us to bring you information and education that's going to help you live a more fulfilling and satisfied life. Today we are departing from a little bit from the norm, because usually I bring you small business owners. Today we have a specialist called Toni Radford, and we are recognising World Diabetes Day. The reason we're doing this is because I think it's a really important topic that we need to be speaking about and we need to be educated about, and myself included. Toni is a transplant nurse coordinator and in the central northern Adelaide Renal and Transplantation service at the Royal Adelaide Hospital. Now, I know the word diabetes, sort of what it means, but I still get a bit confused about type 1 and type 2 and what that means, as well as any preventative or cure approaches for diabetes. So what I'm going to do is bring Toni in, and I invite you also. Hello, Toni. How are you?
Hello, everybody. Hello.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. So I invited you here today to share with us your expert knowledge around diabetes and some of the risks involved, what we can do to help prevent it. We've got people here in the audience. We've got Tracy. Say hello to Tracy and Joanne. And I'll just ask, if you're joining us, can you please share this broadcast, or even better still, invite your friends to watch live. So if there's an invite button for people on your desktop, it's got to go into theatre mode. It's the top right hand corner. If you're on your mobile device, it's the bottom left. So please share and invite, and we will all get educated together. If you have any questions, please ask and we'll attempt to answer them. So do we start at the very beginning?
Well, thank you, Adaire, for asking me to speak on diabetes. Firstly, I'm not a diabetes educator, so just putting that out there to people. Okay. I'm a transplant coordinator, but my specialty area for the last 10 years has been in islet cell transplantation, which is giving cells to people with diabetes to treat, potentially cure their diabetes. So I have worked in renal medicine before that as a nurse and transplant nurse doing kidney transplants. So still working in the kidney area and specialising also in islet transplantations, which is where my knowledge of diabetes has been very important to.
So islet, what was that?
Islets. We'll get to islet cells. But firstly, just putting it out there to anybody in the audience who does have an interest in diabetes, there is, because of World Diabetes Day tonight at the Convention Centre, Professor Toby Coates, who is the Director of Transplantation in our Renal and Transplantation service, is giving a talk which he explains the latest technologies and exciting developments in treating type 1 diabetes, as well as the Convention Centre talk involving specialists in diabetes, endocrinologists. So this talk starts at 6:30 tonight at the Convention Centre. Anybody is welcome to just turn up, or they can go into Diabetes SA website and find out more information. But well worth the travel into the city for that. So I'm going to start firstly explaining there are two different types of diabetes, and most people, when they say diabetes, think, oh, that person can't eat sugar. That's not necessarily the case.
That's the basic thing. Do you have the echo where you are?
It's a little bit echoey.
I might just put my headphones on. Do you have any headphones? We didn't go over before we started.
Sorry about that.
Usually if there's an echo in one spot that belongs, the echo comes from the other one. Now that's fixed it for me. Okay, beautiful.
So there are two different types of diabetes. There's type 1. Well, actually, there's a number of different types, but the most commonly known about types are type 1 and type 2. Now, they're the ones I'll talk about today. There are sort of lower, different types that are sort of a combination of both, and they have their own set of treatments and symptoms as well. But overall, we'll speak about type 1 and type 2. So type 2 diabetes is the one that people hear about where they develop that generally in later life, and it's caused by your body becoming insulin resistant. So your body makes insulin. Insulin is a hormone. The hormone makes your body remove sugar from circulation in your blood and puts it away in the cells where it can be used, particularly in your brain. You need sugar. We need it like petrol in a car. And your insulin pushes that away to the places it's needed. If it's too high, it floats around in your bloodstream and you are deemed a diabetic. So there's a different, bunch of tests.
Type 2?
Type 2 and type 1 both involve high blood sugar levels.
So it's across both of them. That's basically a basic premise of that. Okay, all right, thanks.
So type 2 is one where you develop that in time over a number of years. You may develop it later in life. You hear of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s developing diabetes. And the other type of diabetes is type 1. Now, type 1 diabetes is what used to be termed juvenile diabetes. We don't call it juvenile diabetes anymore. It is a diabetes generally of young people and children. But then there are adults who can develop type 1 diabetes in their 30s and even 40s and beyond.
Okay.
But type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. It's a disease where your own body's immune system attacks the cells of your pancreas and destroy the cells which make insulin. Now, insulin is the hormone that reduces your sugar level if it gets above normal, and it pushes the glucose into the cells where you can use them. So insulin's vitally important to survival. If you don't have insulin in your body at any time, you will die unless you're given injections of insulin. It's that simple. Okay. So people with type 1, I might just show a quick little picture here. I'm sorry I'm not prepared with an actual slideshow. I'm doing it the old
okay. I have to thank you for jumping in at very short notice as well. So I'm just going to put you on full screen there.
Now this picture here.
There we go. Yep.
That there. The rather large red blob on the side is a pancreas, and the part around the edge of that, the sausage-like thing, is part of your bowel that wraps around the edge. The big red edge to it.
Yep, got it.
This is the bowel. This part's the pancreas. The pancreas is made up of a whole bunch of little clumps of cells, little island-like structures of cells made up like a bunch of grapes. See the little coloured diagram here? And each of those little dots is a different type of cell that make up that island or islet. We call it an islet cell. So each one of those made up. Yeah, and each one of those.
Yep, go on. I was just going to say, if you're getting this, just drop a yes in the comments. If you have any questions, please ask them. So go on, Toni. Yep.
So this little structure, which is called an islet cell, contains lots of little tiny aspects to it, little tiny cells within that. And we've coloured them different colours here just to show them the difference. The green ones there are the cells that make insulin, and the other colours make other hormones which are important to function. But we're focusing on the green ones, which are the insulin-producing cells.
Okay.
In type 1 diabetes, those cells are destroyed. They're eaten away. They're destroyed like our bodies destroy the cold virus or a bacteria that we get an infection. Our immune system will chew up and eat that bacteria and destroy it. That's what our body, or people with type 1 diabetes, is happening to these cells. These cells get destroyed by the immune system that targets them for some unknown reason and destroys them.
Okay.
And then they can't make insulin. So the person is immediately becomes type 1 diabetic. They become very, very sick and unwell, present to a hospital or doctor, who then diagnoses type 1 diabetes with a blood test. Okay. And there are antibody tests. You can check immune testing for that.
So now what's the incidence of that, like in terms of percentage of the population? Because you said it's if it used to be known as juvenile diabetes, I would assume that it would have been traditionally found in younger people.
Mm-hmm.
Something that they have in them from birth, is that?
Yeah, it's an immune attack. So you have antibodies in your body which attack, and your immune system destroys the pancreas over time. So what happens is there's about 1.7 million Australians with diabetes. 1.7 million. Out of those, about 500,000 of those people are people who don't actually know they have it yet. They're people just walking around the street with diabetes, which undiagnosed. The true number is about 1 million type 2 diabetics, and there's about 200,000 roughly people with type 1 diabetes, and about 500,000 that don't know yet. So essentially 1.7 million people are affected by diabetes of various types.
That's quite significant. Yes.
It's a huge number. Now, if you look at the numbers of these, that means there's about 2,500 people per year that are diagnosed with diabetes in Australia alone. That number is increasing.
Is that type 1 and type 2?
Put together, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's one person every 5 minutes in Australia being diagnosed with diabetes. And we find that there's a whole bunch of different causes. As I said with type 1, it's autoimmune. Your body attacks the pancreas cells and destroys them, making you immediately a type 1 diabetic. With type 2 diabetes, it's classed as the lifestyle diabetes, where people who perhaps live not the healthiest of lifestyles can gradually develop a situation where their blood glucose slowly becomes higher, their body resists insulin, they're still making insulin normally to a degree, but their body's resisting it, or their pancreas simply starts wearing out and they're not producing enough. And that's where type 2 diabetes comes in. And they're people who, not always, we can't generalize this, but generally people who, who are overweight, who don't exercise or live a fairly sedentary lifestyle. Unfortunately, Indigenous people do have a much higher rate, up to about 4 times higher, in developing type 2 diabetes. So that's the not just Aboriginal community and Torres Strait Islanders, but also Pacific Islanders as well. So these people do have a much greater risk of diabetes, 4 times the Caucasian population risk.
And is that because of the lifestyle?
Generally the lifestyle, but as we know with our figures, that people who live in community and remote areas are actually more than double at risk of dying or going to hospital with types of diabetes, particularly type 2, because of they have lack of specialists and hospitals and doctors available to them. With diabetes as type 2, there's also lower socioeconomic groups of people tend to have the higher numbers with type 2. So people have less money to spend on healthy food, such as fresh fruit and vegetables, maybe able to go and spend $5 on a Domino's pizza and feed the kids. So it's down to simple economics, unfortunately, and sadly that's the case for a lot of families in Australia. And also increase the risks. We know that 2/3 of 2 out of 3 adults are overweight or obese. Now, they're classed as obese if their BMI is over 30. So most people, anyone can look up and Google their height and weight and put those figures into the a Google BMI calculator and work it out.
I'd rather not.
So if you're over 30, you're at risk.
No, seriously, and in that context too, because we are used to now carrying some extra pudding. So even though if we are to say, like, you don't have to be that much overweight to be classed as obese.
No, it's not that much.
And that's a scary part, really, because and for me, someone said that the other day. My husband was talking about it, and he was saying that if you're, so there's only like a notch in your belt between being
overweight and obese.
And I'm just going, wow, that's because we don't actually understand. So I'm reasonably healthy, but I would be classed as obese. I'm on the way back down. But that's something that would be, it's like I would never think of myself as obese.
No, and that's the thing, because of the norm, everybody, gradually getting bigger and bigger, it is becoming a normal thing, to people to be a few kilograms over. So that's what we have to be aware of. But that's not the main cause. There's a number of causes. There are thin people or relatively thin people with type 2. So there's a whole bunch of contributing factors. But essentially,
you just put me up there for a minute. It's all
much on a carrot stick for a while.
It is all education though, isn't it? So
it is all education. So essentially, if people can exercise and lose a bit of weight and eat healthily, that has reduced. But there's things like, there's another high risk of high blood pressure, and over the age of 45, there's a whole bunch of contributing factors that will lead on to that. So we just have to be careful that, or even women who've had large babies, so babies over 9 pounds, or they've had gestational diabetes, because essentially those babies most likely are born to mothers who were on the border of having gestational diabetes, which is diabetes that develops when you're pregnant, but weren't diagnosed at the time because they weren't quite there yet, or they weren't tested. And normally diabetic mums will have big fat babies because of all the sugar. So that puts you at risk of type 2 later in life. So overweight, lack of exercise, gestational diabetes, big babies, or just big babies. Polycystic ovary syndrome is another one. Low socioeconomic group, not exercising much. I mean, it just keeps going on and on. And Indigenous and Pacific Islanders. So, yeah, it's pretty hard to dodge, but there are things you can do by eating and healthily and doing exercises. Unfortunately, the people who can't do anything about it are the people with type 1 diabetes. And type 1 diabetes is probably the really nasty diabetes, which people immediately have to have injections of insulin. Yeah. Type 2 can be managed with losing weight and eating healthily, or it can be controlled using tablets, which basically enhance your body's ability to make use of the insulin you're making. It makes your body make more insulin and various other combinations of those things. Yeah. Of course, you can eventually need, you may eventually need insulin injections if you are a type 2 diabetic. That's not unusual.
Is that if you continue to go down that path and don't take preventative measures, that's where you can end up?
It can lead to that, definitely. So people who continue to remain overweight, who don't exercise for one reason or another, they may, be sick. They may not be able to exercise. They may have kidney failure and be unwell. But that's right. People who continue to not try and reverse the causes can end up requiring, or their body just simply wears out and the insulin they're making naturally just doesn't quite cut it enough, and the tablets have reached the end of their, 10, 20 years of tablets eventually wear out and they need to have injections. But people with type 1 need injections from the beginning. They need injections, and I have a really great picture here again. Sorry about the paper. This is a picture
for you. Hang on, I'll hide that.
This picture is a picture. It might be a bit tricky to see, but the little white things on the bottom are all needles that have been stuck in the grass at Parliament House.
Wow.
Now, this is a JDRF funded sort of a Kids in the House thing, where they take kids with type 1 diabetes each year to Government House to try and sort of promote awareness and to improve resources for these people who suffer from diabetes. And
so if JDRF is
Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, still called Juvenile because it's been around forever, but it's a research foundation that basically is aimed at curing diabetes and awareness of diabetes and helping people with that condition.
Wow.
Each of one of those white things is a needle, and those needles are stuck in the grass, and that is a demonstration of, if you're a child born with type 1 diabetes or developing it as a little kid, you'll have that many needles in 10 years of diabetes. So I don't know how, I'm doing a bit of a close-up there, but they're all individual needles.
So you're saying needles, are they syringes with the needle?
Syringes with a needle on the end that you stick in your body every day, every time, every meal time, breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime.
Wow. Yeah. That's
an average 5 times a day or more. Up to 5 times a day, somebody will have insulin injections. So
is that the average on the wall?
That's average. People normally would need long-acting insulin that works throughout the whole day, and then they need an extra bolus or an extra hit of insulin when they're eating a meal. So they need the regular insulin that floats along in the background, and then when they're having lunch, they might have a sandwich with an apple and a piece of cake. Of course, they'll need a certain amount of insulin. They know how to work that out. There's different calculations people use. They work it out and give themselves a shot. Mm-hmm. The other option for people with on insulin, besides injecting themselves a number of times each day, is called an insulin pump. And the pump has a little tiny fine needle, that's a plastic needle that sits inside under the skin in your tummy generally, and connected to a very thin little tube onto a machine, which is about probably the size of a mobile, or probably smaller than a mobile phone really. And it has a continuous infusion of insulin. So they put a little vial of insulin inside it, and then they program the machine, and the machine delivers, 10 units at lunchtime and 1 unit per hour in between, or whatever their calculation may be.
So you would have to be disciplined to make sure that you eat at the right times, and that if you're doing something like that?
Well, with a pump, it's really good because the pump runs a continuous background infusion of insulin, like you and me are making right now. Our bodies are making insulin trickling into our system all the time. When we eat, there's a bunch of, receptors in our gut that says, hey, there's food coming, and off it all goes. And that starts firing off insulin into our system in response to all these receptors and glucose that come into our, that's digested when we eat. And our body knows how much to make. So if you're on a pump, you then have to program the pump. It's like setting a mobile phone and setting in your alarm clock. You're saying, I'm eating so much carbohydrate, and the machine calculates it and starts injecting over the next few hours a level of insulin. So it's very good, and it won't start the boluses, which is with meals, unless you tell it to. It's not pre-programmed, because you have to tell the pump what you're actually eating, how much.
Yes. Yeah. Because I'm thinking, how would that work? Because otherwise you would have to, so if it's pre-programmed.
Exactly. If you're in the cinema watching a movie, or you're driving your car and you can't eat. So that's exactly right. You tell it when you're eating. The machine does this little calculation that's already been set up by your diabetes educator or endocrinologist, and off you go. They're really great, and they're the best way to control your type 1 diabetes, except they're probably $10,000 to $12,000 per pump.
Ooh.
And you're running on, anywhere up to possibly $100 a fortnight or more with the consumables, the lines, the little connectors and all the bits and pieces. So again, it's a very expensive disease to have. And if you want a pump, you do have to fork out. Fortunately, the JDRF that I've already mentioned do provide pumps for young kids. So if you're under 18 and you're diagnosed with that,
Renal Diabetes Research Foundation. Yep.
Yes, again, and they're the guys that are awesome who do help young people with type 1 access a pump to help control their life and bring their diabetes in check.
Okay, so now we said before the statistics that it seemed to me, or I may have listened or misheard, but it seemed to me like type 2 was by far the biggest.
Exactly.
And so if type 2 is like type 1 is not, it's not preventable because it's an autoimmune disease, type 2 is, if it's lifestyle. Where's the focus? Dylan's asking, are you aware of any good apps to help people work out insulin regimes?
There are a huge number of apps out there available to people with type 1 or type 2 diabetes. The JDRF has a really brilliant website, as does Diabetes SA, and they have all different types of apps or I can't think, educational tools that people can use to assist their diabetes. So people would generally go and see a diabetes educator first and work it out with there, but there are definitely reminders and things you can put into your phone that alarm when you need to eat. And there's also one of the latest things that's come out recently is Abbott Freestyle the Libre, which is a blood glucose reading machine, which what you do, you have a little device that sits in your arm, usually the top of your arm up here, and you can just run, is a little sensor, sits there for 2 weeks, and then you can run a little blood glucose machine or your mobile phone across it like a barcode scanner, like in the supermarket. And it does blip, blip, and it tells you what your blood glucose level is. It does it through clothing.
Isn't technology amazing?
And you don't have to prick your finger. So it's brilliant with children. It also gives because it's a sensor in there all the time, it will give constant readings throughout the day. So it will measure it. It does an internal little calculation, and you can download graphs. You can download data from the whole period of the day. So you get like nice little pie graphs or bar graphs, whichever you like, and it gives you an average. It will tell you if your sugar's starting to trend down or whether your blood level's going up. So that's a really great technology that's out there. And there are a lot of technologies that will help people.
You can. So Toni, we're just about out of time. Before we wrap it up, because we're having a really good time, I've got the echo back, so I'm hoping I can't hear it at the other end. I think it's gone now. So what I wanted to ask you was for type 2 diabetes, is there specific things? I know you mentioned that the people who are more at risk are people who don't exercise, who have poor lifestyle, who maybe who eat too much junk food, that type of thing. So, and I'm thinking, is there? I know there's no magic bullet, but when we're stuck in those ways of being, it is hard to get out of it. But is there some things that you can suggest that people think about doing that might get them even slowly thinking about doing things differently? Because it's like, well, and I know I think it's more a mindset thing, because I know when I was terribly obese, like double my body weight and on the couch, and just getting off the couch to go for a walk was an effort. So and to get into the habit of doing that. So but it is critically important.
It's all about developing new habits and breaking old habits, and that's incredibly hard, as anybody would know, and not associating sitting down watching the TV as grabbing a bar of chocolate, or go to the movies and you have to have popcorn, or it's all these little people have a cigarette and beer, or the other way around.
The mint chop top thing, chop top. Well, I don't do that.
There's definitely a lot that can be done, and definitely obviously it's not going to completely stop it, but the scary thing is there are children and teenagers developing type 2 diabetes, which is technically a diabetes of old people. There are young children and teenagers. US is rife with diabetes, and type 2 is escalating at a rate of knots. We're having one person every 5 minutes, and a lot of them, I'm not saying all, but a lot of them can be managed or prevented or controlled or even reversed by, just lifestyle choices. Obviously not simple, but to lose weight, because that's a very hard thing, and naturally.
Yeah, I think Toni, it is simple, but it's not easy, because it's simple to say exercise. It's simple to say walk around the block.
Yeah, but it's not easy to do.
It's simple. One of the things that I found was really useful is swapping out things. So, and you don't have to do the whole lot, but it's a gradual thing to say, well, instead of having a pie, I'm going to go to, for lunch, I'm going to go and have a salad tub from one of the salad places, and then even if you did that once a week and then increased it for twice a week, and that
set little goals along the way, don't you? You set a goal
like that. It's just because I think doing the whole hollis bolus thing, that just people just like freak out and go, it's just too hard.
Yeah, I think it's baby steps and doing bit by bit. But can I just close quickly by mentioning that diabetes 1 and 2 is the leading cause of blindness in Australia. It is the leading cause of heart attack and stroke. It is up to 4 times higher in somebody with diabetes than somebody without, that they will have a stroke and heart attack. In fact, the biggest killer of people with diabetes is cardiovascular conditions, heart attack, stroke. So that's the biggest thing. People will die with diabetes most likely with that. There's the major cause of amputation in Australia, generally your legs or feet or parts of feet or toes, is the biggest cause from diabetes. Depression, about a third of people with diabetes will suffer from depression at some point during the disease. Kidney failure and dialysis, it's the biggest cause of kidney failure in the world. I started in renal about nearly 30 years ago. It was second cause of renal failure. It's now taken over as number one cause. So, you know, it's a major problem. There's millions of dollars a year that's spent on diabetes. I did have a number somewhere. It was billion something. I wrote it down. I can't remember where I wrote it.
Is that in Australia or worldwide?
Australia.
Yes,
in
Australia.
And I'll pick up a note and see if I can find where I wrote it. But there is enormous a number of dollars spent, our healthcare dollars. About 1 million people a year are hospitalised with diabetes, and about 16,500 people die directly from diabetes. So, yeah, it's a pretty big thing.
And I think I like what Joanne said, that, and I think she had it on the pretty much right, where most of us don't hear due to fear. It's all too horrific, and we say it's never going to happen to us. But it is,
exactly.
It is about saying, looking at your lifestyle, and especially you offer type 2 diabetes, and just saying, well, what can I do now that's going to make incremental changes towards becoming a healthier person, having a healthier lifestyle.
Every little bit help. And don't be discouraged. And I think there's a lot of people that can do something. There's a lot of people who can't necessarily change what's going on in their bodies with diabetes, but definitely adapting a healthy diet is one thing, and doing some exercise. In fact, every single person, diabetic or not, can benefit from that. So, you know, it's not a magic bullet. It's just what we all should do.
Absolutely. And it would definitely contribute to us being around long enough to really annoy our kids.
Of course. Especially if they're over 9 pounds.
That's not Toni, thank you so much. I really appreciate
You're very welcome.
TV with Adaire, and I'll just drop you out. Don't go anywhere. I know you're at work, and I won't keep you too long. I'll talk to you in a moment. So just hang on there while I wind it up.
Thank you. Bye.
Toni Radford, people, talking to us about diabetes, the risks, and some of the things that you can do to help prevent or minimize your risk of getting diabetes, type 2 diabetes, what type 1 diabetes is. Thank you so much. That was awesome. It's Community TV with Adaire. I'm live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Australian Central Daylight Time on My Time TV. Thanks for joining us today. Have a wonderful week, and I do look forward to seeing you next week on My Time TV for Community TV with Adaire.